Hello everybody, my name is Christopher Pennella. I am a science teacher in Jacksonville, Florida, 6th to 12th grade, and today I will be teaching you about Piaget's stages of cognitive development. He came to the conclusion that there are four major stages in a child's development. Roughly it begins at birth and it concludes about at adulthood. The first stage is the sensory motor stage, which is birth to about 2 years old. The next stage is the pre-operation stage, which is 2 to about 7. The third stage is the concrete operation stage. This phase is about 7 to roughly about 11 and a half years old. And the final stage is the formal operation stage, which is about 11 years to into adulthood. From birth to 2 years old. He concluded that schema are mental representations or ideas about things and how we deal with them. Piaget deducted that the first schema of an infant dealing with movement. He believed that a baby's behavior is triggered by certain stimuli, in that they are reflective. After birth, a baby begins to understand the information around it. It receives from its senses. It learns to use some of its muscles and limbs. As you can tell, it's a learning curve. You have to learn and develop. These developments are known as action schemas. Babies are unable to consider anyone else but themselves. Think of it as the terrible twos. It's called the egocentric phase of their lives. Their interests, their wants, their needs, everything only relates to them. The next major aspect of the sensory motor stage is a child begins to understand an object and how they can be manipulated. This is pretty much saying cause and effect on each other. They begin to understand simple ideas of time and space, like understanding ideas of what their family looks like, saying mom for the first time. They are starting to connect the dots. A baby has the ability to build a mental picture of the objects around them. This is why, for the most part, when at a young age, everyone is bombarding them with new images, colors, and ideas. They're trying to build the basis of knowledge. A baby has to explore. As you can tell, this is the first stage. The baby has some knowledge of the world around him, but it's still very minimal. Think into play about the Pickaboo game. This relates to object performance. Literally, a baby thinks that once something goes away from their view, it ceased to exist. So when they go Pickaboo, it's literally gone forever until it returns again. The second stage of development is the pre-operation stage. This is from 2 to 7 years old. This stage is a little bit more in depth due to the length of time. During this stage, a child's thought process is developing. They are still very far from logical thought in the adult sense of the word, but their vocabulary as a child is expanding and developing during this stage. They're going from being a baby to a toddler to slowly starting to get the grasp of education. At the beginning of the pre-observation phase, when they are still 2 to 3 to 4, they are still very egocentric. Once again, thinking they're the center of the universe and everything revolves around them. But as they are exposed to the outside world, other kids, family members, animals, even television, they are starting to grasp and decentralize their thoughts, realizing that other people have attention spans too, other people are involved, other people are needed and necessary. The next aspect of the pre-observation stage is quite humorous in my eyes. It is called animalism. What that means is, at this very young age of grasping information, they think that everything is like them. That everything that exists has some kind of consciousness. What that means, for example, is if a child runs into a piece of furniture, they want to hit it, thinking that it's their fault that they made them hit that. Or if a car won't start, they believe the car is sick and they want to fix it, because all they understand is what they can see around them. There are two more aspects of the pre-operation stage of a child that I want to cover. The first is symbolism. This is what you think it is. A child is starting to associate things with meaning with something else. This can be a variety of things, from an expression on someone's face to mean fear, or hearing a car door close, thinking your dad's coming home, or a certain chime of a bell, meaning that it's time for a nap or time to go to bed. The last aspect of the pre-operation stage is moral realism. This is when a child begins to learn right from wrong. When they have gathered more information, their brain has developed. They understand there are consequences for their actions. They start to realize that if they do something, it directly can affect others and can directly affect themselves. Thus, they're finally becoming a good student. The third stage is the concrete operation stage. This phase includes roughly about 7 to 11 years old. During this stage, the thought process becomes more rational, mature, adult-like, more operational, so to speak. Although the process continues into the teens, there are 4 aspects of the concrete operational stage that I would like to cover. To begin, progression is obviously something you see in everyday life in the classroom, with your students, and this goes with this exact same model. As the child matures, they start to lose some of the characteristics of their earlier stages. They become a lot less egocentric. They become a lot less animalistic with their principles, thinking that everything is alive. They are starting to truly think with concrete ideas of the world around them. The next 2 aspects of this stage go hand in hand in my eyes. First is the ability to manipulate an object and use logical thought process with it. Also, the conserving nature of it, where they can look at something and not have to touch it, and they can just visualize it in their mind, change it in their mind, and develop it with key ideas. This is problem solving. I deal with this in my classroom. I teach about the borderline level of 6th grade, 11-year-olds and 12-year-olds, where I see this aspect. That is used in my classroom. I teach science. So when I show someone a model or a diagram of a cell, they can look at it and visualize that it's realistically a lot smaller than that, microscopic, but they can see a blown up version of it to learn the details. They realize it's not really that big. They understand that a microscope is necessary to use it. I have covered conserving. The last piece of this stage is reversibility, which goes hand in hand with that. Realistically, you can deal with it better in math, to showing that if you add or subtract something and equal it, you can do the reverse of it and change it back. Or in my science classes, if I show them a chemical reaction or a change, they can understand that the parts came from a whole. The product and the reactant go hand in hand. Now we moved on to the final stage in this model, the formal operation stage. The age that varies from 11 to 12 to 16 to adulthood. In this stage, when a child has developed, they can deal with abstract ideas, logically organize a system, they have a base intelligence, they can do complex problems, they can do problem solving. This is when they truly have all the abilities they need to succeed. There are 2 characteristics or aspects of the formal operational stage. The first is the hypothetic deductive reasoning, and it pretty much is what it kind of sounds like. Being able to process something, make a general theory of why it happened, have a hypothesis for why it occurred. Deductive reasoning, understanding that there's multiple steps in solving a problem. I deal with this because when I make someone have to design an experiment, they have to give me the steps, the controls, the different variables involved in the process. And then they have to do the most important part that shows intelligence. Draw a conclusion, analyze the conclusion, and apply it to the outside world and see if it truly matters or if it has a purpose. Thus, they're performing deductive reasoning. The last aspect of this stage is the propositional part of nature, which that means is they can use verbal assertions and ideas and apply them to non-concrete ideas. So they can visualize something, understand something, like using poetry or concepts in English and not have to see it in the real world. Make believe, to make something up, fathom it, understand it, and be able to put forth it without physically needing to see it or touch it. We have now covered all 4 development levels of Piaget stages of cognitive development. Now let's briefly review. Okay, for the brief review of the 4 stages. The first stage, the sensory motor stage, is from birth to 2 years old. The child begins to interact with the environment. The next stage, the pre-observational stage, is from 2 to 7. The child begins to respond to the world's symbolisms and build some responsibility of cause and effect and results. The third stage is concrete operational stage. This one is from 7 to 11 years old. The child learns the rules of such of conservation and development of logic. And the final stage is the formal operational stage, which is 11 to about adulthood. The adolescent can transcend the concrete situations and think about future problems and elaborate. Thank you for listening to my brief presentation on Piaget's stages of cognitive development. I hope you learned something from this. Now I want to pose some questions to you. Question number 1. What stage of development do you think universal screening should be performed? Do you think it should occur at the second stage, the third, or do you believe that this stage should be done even earlier at some stage around kindergarten? My second and final question is, do you believe that differentiated instruction, maybe possibly by using visual aids, audio aids, multiple different texts, is appropriate to try to help struggling readers at a young age? Or should we just go with the RTI approach and go through tiers 1, 2, and 3 to see if accommodations are necessary?